So today I want to talk to you guys about the 4 things you need to know when negotiating a web series deal. As I enter into negotiations for a web series I'm doing with Jim Uhls. Jim is somebody you might know as the guy who wrote the screenplay for Fight Club. If I were to be entering into a web series deal and just sort of got plopped down and beamed in to that situation, it would look really confusing. There are terms like IP reversion clauses and, performance participation deals and waterfalls and things like this, all kinds of kooky language that seems really foreign and frankly overly complicated. But there are a couple things you really got to keep an eye on, and I'm going to go through in this video the 4 things that are kind of the most important thing, so that you don't end up getting stuck holding the financial bag for a lot of the things that frankly the studio or a sponsor or somebody like that should be covering, as well as how you end up owning more of it rather than less of it. And that's ultimately their goal, to pay you as little as possible. So how do you make a favorable deal for yourself and still feel like you have a partner in that studio? One of the things that you have to keep in mind is the production budget. Web series can be as little as $5,000 an episode, and to most of us filmmakers, that's like, holy shit, what I could do with $5,000 per episode is awesome. But in the big scheme of things, what you're expected to deliver is something that has a huge on-screen value. It can go anywhere from $5 to $40K per episode. There are obviously exceptions. We just did something with YouTube Red with Mariah Carey and DJ Khaled and stuff like that. That's in the millions of bucks. That's because massive talent is attached. So there are exceptions, but your average web series is anywhere from $5,000 to $40,000. So you have to remember that. So what does that mean for you, right? Like, how much of that do you get to keep? In the end, remember that on top of that production budget, there's always a 10% executive producer's fee. So that 10% is yours, right? So let's say you're doing 10 episodes. That's $50K to $400,000, right, in production budget. So you would get 10% of that. So that's super important. Now let's talk about production. Very often when we sell a project, it might be my first outing with these people, and they have their own kind of stable of production companies they like using. So sometimes you're just getting partnered with a production company you may not have worked with, but it makes the studio feel comfortable. However, if you are the production company and you end up producing it, you can expect 5% on top of that production fee. So if it's $50K, you're looking at $2,500 production fee there. If you're up in the $400,000, $500,000 range, that starts to become something real. And finally, the 4th thing that we're going to talk about is separate talent fees. If you are to, say, hire somebody that's $24,000 and your budget is $70,000, right? Then look at how much gets eaten up by talent. So it doesn't make sense for you to eat that cost. Sometimes they try to pass it on to you, and it doesn't really work. So what we do is that's a separate fee for either the sponsor or the studio to handle, because sometimes we don't know exactly what talent we're getting. We know kind of a grouping of people we're after, but we don't know exactly who we're going to get and exactly what that deal is going to be structured like. So we can't budget for that. So we always say, look, this is a pass-through. This is something, we don't get a fee on that or anything. What we get is the studio or the sponsor to pay for that talent. So if I'm getting a big YouTuber or an actor from TV or a stand-up comic or somebody like that, I have to realize that that's a whole separate negotiation with their agent and management. So we can't budget for that because then we get locked in to something that ends up really crushing our ability to produce effectively. So one of the things you have to remember is that saying that's a holdback, that's something that you're going to say, look, I'm going to negotiate the best possible deal with this talent. If you want this talent, this is what that's going to cost. We're not taking a fee for it, but that's going to be separate from the production budget. So these are some things you have to remember, that your production budget is, something that can be negotiated, but there is a range. Your executive producer fee is almost always 10%. Sometimes you can negotiate more, but that's rare and usually reserved for, big names. Your production fee, if you are the production company, is at 5%, and your talent fee, whatever you're paying your talent, should be negotiated separately and be held out of the production budget and have a separate cost structure that is passed through your budget, but there's never an added fee for it. So I hope that helps, and that's something that I think is going to get you to a place where when you do finally go into that negotiation with a studio or a sponsor, that you're going to be able to have some framework or benchmarks for you to have as you enter those negotiations. I hope these videos help, and I have a lot more coming out this year, so stick around. There's going to be a lot of juicy information on the web series business.